The emergency room was chaos, as always. The sharp smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint coppery tang of blood in the air, and the endless symphony of beeping monitors, hurried footsteps and muffled cries filled the space. Dr. Leah Carter moved through it all like a seasoned veteran, her white coat flapping behind her as she barked orders, checked vitals and stitched wounds with steady hands. This was her world, fast-paced, unpredictable and unrelenting. She had no time for distractions. At least, that's what she told herself. "Dr. Carter, we've got a GSW rolling in," a nurse called, holding the door open for the paramedics pushing a stretcher. Leah grabbed a pair of gloves and ran to the patient, her sharp brown eyes assessing the man on the stretcher. He was mid-30s, muscular and covered in blood. His face was contorted in pain, but he was still conscious. His white T-shirt was soaked through with crimson, the entry wound just below his ribcage. "What's your name?" she asked quickly, leaning over him as the stretcher bumped through the hall. "Adam," he said, his voice tight with pain. "Adam Rivera." "Okay, Adam. You're in good hands," Leah said, her voice steady, calming. "What happened?" Adam groaned, clutching at his side. "Wrong place, wrong time. A robbery gone bad." Leah nodded, already calling out orders to the trauma team. "Let's move him to Trauma Bay 2. Prep for imaging, start an IV with fluids, and get me 2 units of O-neg just in case." As they wheeled him into the bay, Adam caught her eye, his grip tightening briefly on her wrist. "You're not going to let me die, are you, Doc?" There was fear in his eyes, but also something else, a full of trust. Leah paused for half a second, her hand covering his. "Not on my watch." The next several hours were a blur of activity. The bullet had missed his vital organs, but just barely. The surgical team worked tirelessly to stop the internal bleeding, with Leah coordinating everything from the sidelines. When she finally stepped out of the operating room, peeling off her gloves, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Adam was stable, alive. It was late, well past midnight, when she went to check on him. He was lying in his hospital bed, pale but awake. His dark eyes lit up when he saw her enter. "You again," he said, his voice raspy but teasing. Leah smirked, pulling up a stool beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot," he said with a weak laugh. She rolled her eyes. "That's original." For a moment they just looked at each other. Leah wasn't sure what it was about him, but there was something magnetic about Adam Rivera. Maybe it was the way he joked even in the face of pain, or the way his eyes seemed to soften when they landed on her. Either way, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark. "You saved my life," Adam said, breaking the silence. "It's my job," Leah replied, brushing off the compliment. "No, really," he pressed, his tone serious now. "Thank you. I've got a kid at home, Nina. She's 9, and because of you, I get to go home to her." Leah froze. She hadn't expected that. "You're a dad?" Adam nodded. "Yeah, single dad, actually. Nina's mom passed away a few years ago." Something shifted in Leah. She'd dealt with countless patients in her career, but Adam's story hit her differently. Maybe it was because she had grown up with a single mom herself, or maybe it was the way his voice softened when he talked about his daughter. Either way, she felt the walls she'd built around her heart crack just a little. Over the next few days, Adam remained in the hospital for observation, and Leah found herself checking on him more often than was strictly necessary. She told herself it was just good patient care, but the way her heart fluttered every time she walked into his room said otherwise. For his part, Adam seemed just as drawn to her. He would tease her about how serious she looked, calling her Dr. No-Nonsense, and she would roll her eyes but secretly smile. They talked about everything: his job as a mechanic, her grueling hours in the ER, his dreams for his daughter, her love for hiking and photography. One evening, as she sat by his bed after her shift, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're incredible, you know that?" he said softly. Leah blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "You save lives every day," he said, his gaze steady. "But you don't just save them. You care. I see it in the way you talk to your patients, the way you go the extra mile. You don't just fix people, you heal them." She felt her cheeks warm. "You're giving me too much credit." "No, I'm not," he said firmly, "and I'll prove it." "How?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Adam grinned, the mischief back in his eyes. "Let me take you to dinner, once I'm out of here, of course." Leah laughed, shaking her head. You're unbelievable. Is that a yes? He pressed, leaning forward slightly despite the wince of pain it caused. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled. It's a maybe. A week later, Adam was discharged, and true to his word, he called Leah. She agreed to meet him for dinner, and what started as a casual meal quickly turned into hours of laughter, shared stories, and a connection that felt as natural as breathing. They began seeing each other regularly, and Leah quickly fell in love with not just Adam, but Nina as well. The little girl was bright and curious, with her father's mischievous smile and a heart full of love. For the first time in years, Leah allowed herself to dream of a life outside the hospital, a life filled with family dinners, movie nights on the couch, and hikes through the woods with Adam and Nina by her side. Months later, as they stood on a hill overlooking the city, the sun setting behind them, Adam took Leah's hand. "You changed my life, Leah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just that night in the ER, but every day since. You showed me what love looks like again." Tears filled her eyes as she smiled at him. "You saved me too. I didn't even realize how much I needed this. Needed you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the world around them faded away. In the chaos of the ER they had found each other, and together they built a life full of love, laughter, and joy. A life worth fighting for every single day.